Blackbutt Reserve is covered in mounds of mulch and there's still a few trees down, but from tomorrow selected picnic and barbecue areas as well as the koala, kangaroo and wombat exhibits will be back open to the public.
Our tracks and trail system is not accessible at this stage to the public and we're really requesting people to stay off those areas. So we've been cordoning off areas and trying to make the area as safe as possible.
There's still no time frame as to when the rest of the park will reopen. Meanwhile, there's one positive being drawn from the damage caused by the storm to the Merewether Ocean Baths. The Lord Mayor says Council now has the opportunity to modify the structure so that it could possibly include a cafe.
We'd hope that we can do something better than what's there now. That's a building that was built tens of years ago and it's served a purpose. Now's the opportunity to have a look at its future.
Newcastle Ocean Baths also sustained minor damage, as did the Surf Lifesaving Club at Nobby's Beach, and 100,000 cubic metres of sand has been lost off Stockton Beach. Council now faces a race against time to get Newcastle's coastline back to normal ahead of the summer trade.
So we need to take the preparation to make sure the city is looking spick and span for summer.
Madeline Bond, NBN News.
With 16 fights and 13 wins, Pat Kennedy's credentials were far superior to those of Brian Fitzgerald, and for the first two rounds at least, the big boys' bout pretty much went to script. Even more stunning, the Sydney sider survived, emerging as a real contender. And by the fourth, things were just getting started. It turned into a classic contest with plenty of contact, but it was Fitzgerald who left a lasting impression. Kennedy called on everything though to get himself out of trouble to finish with anything but a pretty win.
Full credit to Brian. We're mates outside the ring. We'll probably be mates after this war. We may even do it again.
And what a show that'd be.
It was a very different scene at the Hunters State Emergency Service headquarters today. For the first time in more than 2 weeks, desks were all but empty, with volunteers able to rest after tending to thousands of calls for help.
Overall, an excellent effort from the volunteers, the people in Orange. They've really worked themselves to the bone.
Since the devastating storm struck on Friday the 8th of June, hundreds of crews have worked day and night. They've come to the rescue of scores of people stranded in flooded homes, sandbagged countless properties under threat, and removed hundreds of fallen trees. The operation officially wound up just moments ago. SES crews will now go into recovery mode and tally up the cost of the operation, which is expected to come in at around $300,000. That figure covers things such as crane hire and the payment of specialised staff. Anyone who still has trees down or storm-related damage to their property is now asked to take matters into their own hands, with volunteers taking a well-deserved break.
Volunteers have now been working 18 days and they need to get back to work. Some volunteers have taken time off work, some are off without pay, some are on holidays.
Madeline Bond, NBN News.
It wasn't the result the Knights wanted, yet their coach says there's a lot to like about the side which travelled to the Gold Coast, in particular Newcastle fullback Kurt Gidley, who continues to toil with a shoulder injury.
He is one very, very tough cookie, along with plenty of others there tonight as well.
Most teams are looking for spirit, and that's one thing that I know we've got an abundance of here at Newcastle at the moment. We're looking for polish, and that's going to come with experience.
Danny Badir has provided plenty of it though and didn't disappoint. Neither did Steve Simpson, although an ankle injury could cause some angst this week. For Dan Toller, his night was turned inside out within minutes, scoring his first try of the year, only to hobble off a short time later, joining others.
Chris Bailey's got the most wicked knee cork I've ever seen. Brad Tye took a shoulder injury into the game and aggravated an AC joint problem.
Forced to move their home game to the Newcastle Athletics field, it took Phoenix just seconds to settle in off the boot of former Jet Steve Eagleton. Down 1-0, league leader Lake Macquarie found some fight out wide, setting up Sean Babbage. And there was more to come. What was a clean kick from the corner turned messy, but made good by Joel Wood, his first of 2. Phoenix never really got a look in as John Stojanovski gave the visitors a 2-goal lead. Lake Macquarie gave away nothing and took everything as Sean Babbage again found himself in the thick of things to finish with a double. Like its name suggests, the idea of a lap dash is just that, and 7 new Tri-Series class records were set on the Tamworth track over the weekend. The format suited the East Maitland pairing of Peter and Elizabeth Robinson, with dad and daughter sharing their open-wheeler Formula 3 racer.
He's always giving me advice, telling me what lines to take, where to go faster, where to brake a bit sooner. He's very keen for me to follow in his footsteps, I think.
Finishing just under 2 seconds behind her old man, Elizabeth was also the fastest lady around the figure 8 track, 7th overall, beating over 50 blokes. In the Australian Ice Hockey League, Newcastle remains in 3rd behind Adelaide, despite a tense round 11 win over the weekend. Pierre Martin got things started for the hosts. And from there it pretty much went goal for goal, including this solo effort from Newcastle import Brad Wanchulak. At full time, both teams had scored 5 goals each, forcing the match into a shootout. Backup goalie Tom Gouldstone held his nerve to keep Adelaide out of contention. Chris Bailey has a corked knee, Brad Tighe contending with a troublesome shoulder, while Dan Toller pulled a hamstring in what was every bit a painful loss to the Titans. Despite the result, there were some positives with Adam Woolno's knee holding up, while rookie half Luke Walsh scored his first top-grade try, albeit off a Gold Coast blunder.
Mate, it was just one of the things. I was there just on the right time. A bit of presto mucked up a bit, dropped the ball, and I was just there to pick it up, mate. And so quite easy.
There was nothing easy about this effort though, and for big back rower Corey Patterson it was hard to take. The young knight hadn't seen the tackle before today, yet he's unlikely to forget it, and neither will Titans fans.
I think a lot of the credit goes to Mark Minicello. He sort of scrambled and sort of ankle tapped him before he got to me. If he had to come at me full steam, there's no way I would have been able to stop him.
Unfortunately, he pulled out all his weapons, and like he stopped me close to the line, obviously, and it was a great tackle, and I gave my all, and I just came up short, unfortunately.
It was the story of Newcastle's night, fast finishes yet slow off the mark.
We've only scored first in one match, I think, in the whole year, and I don't know what it is, but we're always slow starting. So I think we can work on our start a lot more.
Looking from the outside, you wouldn't know the occupants of this Kerry Bay house narrowly escaped tragedy in the early hours of yesterday morning. Police say 5 children who'd been left unattended in the Hampton Street home while their carer visited a neighbour could have perished when a fire broke out in the kitchen, had the eldest, a 14-year-old boy, not acted so quickly to help them escape. The Department of Community Services is now investigating the incident. KidSafe says it's common for parents to leave children in the care of an older sibling or teenage babysitter.
It happens because we don't have enough support systems around us, so that if mother or father needs to go out, that there's quite often not anyone that they can call in.
But KidSafe says leaving a teenager in charge is simply too big a responsibility for them should something go wrong.
The problem with leaving older children in charge of younger children is that the older ones don't recognise the same way as adults do the dangers that children are in. And then if something happens, they can panic.
KidSafe recommends babysitters be made to practice the family's fire escape plan. Christy Carter, NBN News.
As the salvage crew continues to work towards a refloat, mapping of the ocean floor was expected to be finished late this afternoon. Once completed, the ideal path for the removal of the vessel will be selected. A third sea anchor was laid today, with Thursday afternoon now shaping as start time for the ship's attempted departure. Despite visible signs of damage, the Newcastle Port Corporation again defended the health of the vessel.
The salvage team advises me that it is standing up well. We've been able to monitor it internally and externally.
With the big day drawing closer, amateur and expert opinion is divided about the chance of success. Brett Devine's salvage company has overseen operations such as the Excalibur in 2002 and the Chinese tug at Scott's Head in 1999. He believes reefs will provide a massive headache for the Pasha Bulker.
While she's in that surf zone, it's very difficult to work on. And that's my concern. If she goes out and gets stuck on the rocks outside, again, you have a problem.
If the bulk carrier can't be refloated, he says it could be dragged onto the beach, dismantled and removed. But a time frame for that is anyone's guess.
I don't know, 3, 4, 5 months. I don't know. It's an unknown thing until we had a look at the damage report on the vessel.
Mitchell Hughes, NBN News.
It was the nation's worst ever naval disaster. All 645 Australian sailors perished that November night, except for one, whose body on a raft washed up on Christmas Island months later.
With a tremendous loss of life, all hands, and all we were left with was a nameless body in a forgotten grave.
The unnamed sailor's remains were exhumed last October, with dental records, likely age and height, used to rule out most of the crew. Fabric from white overalls found in a press stud narrowed the field to 3, Alan King, Frederick Schock or Alan Wallace Wilson. Investigators expect to know within days whether they can get a DNA from the remains to compare with likely relatives. And while one family could have a body to bury after all these years, there will be no closure for others.
No, it's no closure, but it's something that we feel should have happened a long time ago. The end of the hostilities.
Port Stephens' Judy Bennett and Captain John Quinn lost their father George when the ship went down. They, like so many others, are still searching for answers on the fate that befell the Sydney.
Not just being told the latitude, longitude and the depth she's at, but for a scientific examination of the ship to take place and try and unravel the mystery as to what really happened, because I don't believe the truth has ever been told.
Jessica Phyllis, NBN News.
What do Lisa Ho, Alex Perry, Nikki Zimmerman and Akira Isagawa have in common? They all studied fashion, and all of them at TAFE. Their creations bathed in the giddy glow that is the catwalk spotlight and flooded with praise from a fashion-loving public, they are inspiring countless others to strive for nothing less.
I want my own label pretty much.
I'd like to have my own range, my own label, be doing fairly well, which everyone does want to do.
It's not all glamour, it's hard work.
Margaret Leithabarra has been teaching fashion at TAFE for 40 years and is known as the woman with a little technique and trick for everything.
I just like to look at that on the other side. The rest is perfect.
Margaret recalls the introduction of industrial overlockers as a fashion industry turning point, while the business of actually selling clothes is now a TAFE priority.
A lot of garments are being made offshore now, so now they need to learn marketing, buying the fabrics from overseas.
In saying that, sewing and pattern making remain core components of the fashion course, which starts at the, well, drawing board.
So put in all your balance lines, shoulder.
It's expression. You draw with how you feel, what the garment should look like. It's a way of getting the message across about your garments.
First-year student Adam Mew wants to make a range of clothing he describes as surfwear mingled with high fashion.
It's the only thing I can picture myself doing. I wasn't happy labouring, so use my drawing skills.
Mother of 6 and motorcyclist Dortia Rizla found shopping for clothes a limited experience, so she wants to make her own.
This is going to put me in my direction to make bigger clothing for people and motorcycle gear, and I think there's an outlet there for it.
80% of each class for about the last 3 or 4 years have been getting work, so some of them are self-employed, but others are snapped up along the way, and employers are waiting for them to finish TAFE so that they can put them on full-time.
And final year student Liz Lynn has an employer waiting in Brisbane.
The agency is so got lots of different brands, and so I'll be selling those and helping out with everything just to start off, but then hopefully be a seller and agent eventually.
TAFE graduate Sarah Ploy is all of those things and then some. She has her own label and already sells to a boutique fashion cum coffee house in Newcastle's Derby Street.
Last year I did a small business course to help me along with that side of things. So that was a really big help as well.
Texture and tweed are the buzzwords in Sarah's collection in what is a one-woman business.
The collar and the bows kind of add that childlike kind of feel to it.
Red Riding Hood sort of style.
Yeah, definitely.
Her work has already hit local catwalks. The aim is to crack the capital city markets. And here's the sobering statistic. Less than 1% of students go on to become designers exclusively. Yet, most find what TAFE calls meaningful work.
Trial everything, do what the boss says, sweep the floors, pour the wines and work tirelessly, and they'll succeed.
Tomorrow night, a look at the very fashionable building trade of carpentry.
It's now 18 days since the collier blew onto Nobby's Beach, and since then some of the best minds in the salvage business have been formulating plans to remove her. Cables now run from the ship's winches to giant anchors set 400 metres out to sea. A small flotilla of powerful tugboats is ready to offer its combined muscle, and a crack environmental team is on standby in case of an oil spill. Now it's simply a matter of choosing the best possible time and tide.
It is aimed for Thursday evening, but if conditions and weather isn't right for Thursday evening, we will look at Friday, we will look at Saturday. We've said that this will be a long process.
This nautical chart, superimposed over a photo of the ship's position, shows a number of small reefs that could pose problems when the vessel is being refloated. And when the effort does come, people will be kept away by police, who plan to seal off the immediate area to both cars and pedestrians.
So we'll be enforcing roadblocks all up along Watt Street, which will stop vehicle access here. Obviously, local residents will still have access.
This week's evening tides reach their crescendo on Saturday night with a 1.8 metre high. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
Jennifer Wilson is lucky to be alive. In March, the 14-year-old suffered a heart attack while doing warm-ups in her Year 9 PE class at Irrawang High School.
When I first woke up at the hospital, they told me that I've had a heart attack type thing and that I was just in ICU. So I woke up in ICU wondering what I was doing here.
Jennifer's heart simply stopped beating. Her teacher, Janet Turner, immediately began CPR along with 2 other staff members until ambulance officers arrived. They say had her teacher assumed Jennifer had fainted or had an asthma attack instead of a heart attack, the teenager would have died.
CPR has absolutely saved Jennifer's life.
I'd like to thank the teachers that were there and my friend Jackie, who was running with. She spotted it out and everything, and then the ambulance officers and all the people that helped me.
Today, the 3 teachers and 6 paramedics received ambulance commendation awards for their heroic actions.
As anyone has a heart attack or collapses, to check their pulse and do CPR straight away.
Christy Carter, NBN News.
This land was once lush coastal rainforest until the Fern Creek Gully coal mine came along in the 1920s with trees and ferns torn out to make way. Now it's on the road back, thanks to the vision of landowner Peter Dalton and a simple idea to keep the plants on his property alive.
I'd planted some land care plants here, and we had a 9-month drought, and I'd kept them alive with mains water, and then it started raining, and I saw water coming out of the drain here. And I thought, we could be harvesting that.
Money from a federal government grant went towards setting up a system that could capture otherwise wasted storm water from a 100-metre stretch of a local road.
It takes water off the road, through a culvert, down a pipe, diverts that water into 60,000 litres of storage. That is then used through a pump system and an irrigation system to drip irrigate plants for re-establishment of the rainforest.
A recent bushfire cleared out all the bitu bush and lantana from the site, and with the weeds now gone, Peter and his land care friends have begun planting the rainforest plants that will in time restore part of the ecology that was lost. It's a simple plan that could be used to harvest stormwater in almost any neighbourhood. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
OH&S, the bane of some workplaces and a saviour for others through massive occupational health and safety reform. In the TAFE carpentry course, knowing how to make a door is important.
We want this striker plate dead flush with your jamb.
But doing so without injuring yourself is paramount. And let's face it, the building site is fraught with danger. An old handsaw, a faulty drill, even a rusty nail. But you won't find anything like that in these workshops, or at least you shouldn't, because TAFE apprentices now know better.
Safety's pretty hard, and come to TAFE and it's exactly the same. You've got to do all the bookwork and before you pick up a tool, and that's the way it is now.
The TAFE workshop looks like a construction site, and it's supposed to. Apprentices once built scale models, now they are pretty much working on the real things.
You're marking this up as though it's the centre of a door, and it's working pretty well to the right height for a door with this practice block.
It makes the students, teachers say, better prepared for an industry which is becoming more specialised.
The whole job is broken up now, whereas one person would follow it through. It's broken up into its various areas.
Years ago you had to build everything yourself. Now you get pre-cut frames and pre-cut trusses, which we had to adapt to.
And who is your typical carpentry student? Is it the bloke with the mohawk or the dad who at 47 is an apprentice?
No one's ever too old to learn. If you stop learning, well, you might as well stop living. I mean, there's always stuff to learn.
Of the construction trades, carpentry is the most popular, with classes here at the Hunter Institute full. There's even a waiting list for a night post-trade course where Certificate 4 students can study for a builder's licence.
Goes for 2 years. It's a big thing to come home from a hard day's work and keep going for an extra 3 or so hours.
Still, Stephen Davis stuck with it, all part of the framework as he builds towards starting his own carpentry business.
It's in the family. Grandfather's a carpenter. Well, he was a carpenter. Yeah, it's always been good to get into the houses and get into the timber.
Such enthusiasm saw the 26-year-old named the Master Builders Association Apprentice of the Year for the Hunter region. TAFE had something to do with it too.
The theory complements the practical, and if without the theory there's really no knowledge to come onto a site and put it into place.
Tomorrow night, getting a head start on a career in hairdressing.
I got a couple more quick ones on the inside underneath him. He let one go and I got an 8 on it, so those were my 2 good waves.
He joined the Knights walking wounded at training, but Kurt Gidley will soon join his New South Wales teammates in Sydney. He admitted he was a bit shocked by his selection, but he's still hoping to make an impact as the Blues look to avoid a series whitewash.
Mate, if you ask any of the players, it's never a dead rubber. It's, someone like myself, it's a big occasion again, and I'm really looking forward to playing again.
Adding to a huge injury list, Brian Smith is now coping with the loss of 3 of his best players, but he couldn't be happier for Gidley.
I don't think I've ever coached a player who deserves to be in the rep team as much as Kurt.
Terence Siu returns to first grade to cover Danny Badiris, while Mitchell Sargent will start at prop in Knights colours for the first time.
He's an experienced guy, and we've got so many younger blokes in our team that I think Mitch is a real good influence.
Chris Bailey and Brad Tyre will be given every chance to prove their fitness, but injury has ruled Dan Tolar out for at least 3 weeks. Meanwhile, the Blues' loss will be the Knights' gain, with Jared Mullen overlooked by New South Wales selectors.
That's the bonus for us, is we get to keep our young halfback pairing working together.
Mitchell Hughes, NBN News. They call themselves Team Adrenaline, and there'll be plenty pumping through the body when this group touches down in the US on Friday.
Lindsay has been over there before. The others, I think all of them have never even flown in an aeroplane before. So they're all really looking forward to an experience of a lifetime.
Laurie Burgess and Lindsay Guy will compete in the fighting arena, while Samantha Scott and 9-year-old Bailey Graber will wield weapons in extreme and traditional disciplines. Peter Kirkwood will showcase his skills in the kata discipline during a gruelling 2 days of competition.
50 rings going for 2 solid days trying to get all the competitors through.
12-year-old Samantha has won state titles in multiple disciplines and is regarded as one of the world's best by the International Karate Association. But she admits she's a little nervous about showcasing her skills at the US Open.
You don't beat people up, but it's a lot of hard work with the weapon, and if you drop it, you're disqualified.
The event takes place in Orlando on the 6th and 7th of July. Mitchell Hughes, NBN News.
Strong winds ripped up a mean chop on Newcastle Harbour today. The pilot tender almost disappeared in a wall of spray. The Stockton ferry was jostled, and all the while the Pasha Bulker stood in its imposing position, its days on the beach now numbered. Today's Pasha watchers shivered in the biting winter westerly, while 2 of the tugs that'll be used in tomorrow night's refloat attempt secured cables to the ship with the help of the salvage company's helicopter, which also copped a buffeting in gusts reaching 87 kilometres an hour. Like thousands of others, Port's Minister Joe Tripodi braved the cold to pose for a photo and says the first refloat attempt remains on track for tomorrow night.
The Kira has been connected now for quite a while, and the Woona has just been connected too. So we have lines from the tugs going to the ship. Weather conditions are favourable, and we hope that remains the case.
From 6 o'clock tomorrow morning, Newcastle's East End will be sealed off by police. No cars will be allowed east of Watt Street, and pedestrians will be barred from Wharf Road east of the Pilot Station, as well as Fort Drive and most of Shortland Esplanade. The only vantage point will be near the Newcastle Ocean Baths.
Look, public safety is our priority here, and that's what we're committed to, and we're going to take every precaution necessary. If that disappoints some people, we apologise for that.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
At 493,000 residents, Newcastle is now Australia's biggest non-capital city. The Hunter's total population is 589,000 people, and the census shows the population is ageing. The region has the highest proportion of people aged over 65, and 5.4% of them require some sort of government assistance.
What this does is give policymakers and governments and councils and community groups the opportunity to understand their area and the issues that they have to work within, and so that they can plan effectively for the future.
There's been a decrease in the number of families with children living in the Hunter. 60,000 homes are financed and 50,000 properties are rented. 68,000 homes are owned outright, and that's despite the census revealing Hunter incomes are lower than the Australian average.
It is a little bit lower than what we've got for the rest of Australia. It's $396 a week as the median income.
But while we're financially poor, we're the most generous. 1 in 5 people is involved in some kind of volunteer work. Christy Carter, NBN News.
This is what 1 million litres of gushing water can do. 4 lanes of Turl Street between Industrial and Cormorant Drive disappeared into a large water-filled hole at around 5:45 this morning. Hunter Water says the trouble was caused by a split in a connection pipe between 2 large water mains.
When the water flowed from the split, it undercut the road, washed out all the gravel that's beneath the road pavement. It caused the road to buckle and then subside and created a large pothole in the road.
One motorist was unlucky enough to be driving on the section of road as it disintegrated. While the driver managed to escape to safety, her car didn't. Repair and drainage work began this morning. The burst water pipe has caused tens of thousands of dollars worth of damage and left people living in Stockton and Fern Bay without water for more than 2.5 hours. The incident resulted in lengthy traffic delays in both directions and caused Newcastle Airport to hold back some flights. The Roads and Traffic Authority says the road will remain closed until tomorrow morning and advises motorists to expect further delays on Industrial Drive and Maitland Road. Madeline Bond, NBN News. A rare weather pattern is being blamed for the almost continuous rainfall experienced across Newcastle and the Central Coast this month.
The majority of this rainfall has all come from one low pressure system, but there was also another low pressure system that formed the following weekend, which also dumped some quite significant rainfall.
So far, Newcastle has received just over 489 millimetres, beating the previous wet weather record set back in 1950 by 3.9 millimetres. And the Central Coast has received a record-breaking 605.4 millimetres this month.
The normal amount of rainfall is only 100 to 150 millimetres, so we've got 3 to even 4 times that.
Saturday, the 9th of June, was the wettest day for both regions. Newcastle received about 210 millimetres of rain, while the Central Coast copped a huge 293.6 millimetres, which is almost as much as it received in the first 6 months of last year.
Both the Central Coast and Newcastle are the wettest spots on the map for the entire country, and this is quite significantly as well.
Madeline Bond, NBN News.
The winds and rising swell of the long weekend storm beached up to 50 vessels around Lake Macquarie. The salvage effort to retrieve them was today continuing in all corners of the lake, despite the blustery conditions.
A barge and one with a steel workboat with a crane on it, and they go around with excavators and they ease the boats off the lake or pull them off the bottom and then pump them out, refloat them, tie them alongside and then bring them up to us to lift out with the travel lift.
At Marmong Cove Marina, of 20 vessels severely damaged, less than half can be repaired. The storm has left this $130,000 vessel high and dry permanently. Insurance assessors this week writing it off. Up to 10 others face a similar fate, and it's not hard to see why. It's expected to take 6 to 12 months before the repair work on the 50 salvaged vessels is completed.
Meanwhile, across the lake today, those in the market for a new boat were testing the latest innovation. On water, it may look like your average boat, but watch this. At $80,000 each, though, a boat with sea legs doesn't come cheap. The State Emergency Service is looking to purchase a fleet of the amphibious boats to use in times of flood. Christy Carter, NBN News.
On Friday, September 15 last year, a group of teenagers gathered around a campfire in bushland just 100 metres from Glendon Crescent in Glendale. But the party soon escalated. Police facts say that at about 9 p.m, the victim, a 15-year-old boy, confronted the accused and removed his shirt. A witness told the court the victim said, "Come on, fight me." The witness was then asked, did James, the accused, respond? The witness said that James warned the victim not to mess with him, saying, "I've been on ice for 2 days." The court was told that the victim then headbutted the accused and they both started punching and wrestling on the ground. A witness said the victim then yelled, "I've been stabbed," and that blood was all down his stomach and on his pants. He then fell onto the ground, crying and shaking. The 15-year-old died in hospital 12 hours later. James Williamson, a labourer from Glendale, has maintained that he was pursued and then bashed. He's also denied ever possessing a knife or a sharp instrument. But James Williamson has admitted to holding a glass crack pipe. 2 witnesses described seeing him holding something. One saw something black, the other a blade. But he later agreed that it could have been a glass pipe. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
There's a little-known secret which the regulars probably won't want us sharing, but you can get your hair cut, coloured, styled even by TAFE apprentices.
I just ring up at any time and tell them I'm coming in and that's it.
And it's cheap. Pam Waters has pretty much come in for the works, the price around $24.
I've had my hair streaked or foils and I've had a cut and now I'm going to have a blow wave.
Has there ever been a time where you're not?
No. The girls are very good here, they're very efficient.
Much like the clientele, the styles are a mix of young and old, from the traditional to the colourful. And here's why they call them foils. Men are taken care of as well, be it for a cut, trim or shave. In this environment, it's open slather. No strand of hair's untouched, but mannequins don't talk back, and that's a problem. Hence the real heads.
That's one of the really big skills that they need to learn to develop. So having that rapport with a client, being able to have a conversation, learning how to sell products to them.
It's competitive too. Often being a hairdresser isn't enough to make the cut.
Because I wanted to build onto my work experience area. I've done beauty therapy in the past and I just wanted to build some more trades into it, and I want to open my own salon up one day.
The delivery has changed. No longer do apprentices do the same task at once. It's more learn at your own pace, and flexibility is the key. That's where Abby Mandel comes into the fold. So why does she want to be a hairdresser?
It's about making the client happy and about what the client wants. You want them to be happy with what they've got and you want them to have what they want.
And here's what Abby will get as a school-based hairdressing apprentice.
They'll end up with their HSC. They'll end up completing what's equivalent to the first year of their apprenticeship, and they're earning money at the same time.
The Year 11 student is among the first in New South Wales to undertake the scheme introduced this year.
I think Abby's the perfect candidate. She's worked in the salon for around 6 months previous, so we knew we were committed to her future. But in saying that, we felt that she was just a tiny bit young to take on full time. Being only 16, we find at 18 is a really good age.
Of course, Abby has stars in her eyes. One day she wants to move into artistic hairdressing, but for now, there's a floor to be swept, the broom an essential tool of the trade. Tomorrow night, the nuts and bolts of becoming a mechanic.
Looking to avoid last year's farce, which saw just 9 players fit for the Jets' first fixture, coach Gary Van Egmond moved reasonably quickly to assemble his squad. But with the sale of Nick Carl, retirement of Paul Ocon and question marks hanging over deals with 2 South American players, cracks are beginning to appear in what was a pretty solid foundation. Time is working against the club as the first official pre-season clash with Perth on July 14 draws closer.
In that regard, yeah, we're behind the 8 ball a little bit compared to what other teams are. I think they've nearly got their full complement as we speak.
Then there's the added challenge of having little to no game time, with 3 friendly matches against local sides washed out.
So, we're probably looking at ourselves trying to get some games against the Sydney teams.
But there is some positive news, with Adam Griffiths due to arrive tomorrow and Noel Spencer expected next Monday. Jessica Phyllis, NBN News.
It's an 85. I was at 85. I've ridden 80s like in dirt bikes for a while, but yeah, never on a speedway bike.
This neonatal crib is often a life-saving piece of equipment for sick and premature babies admitted to hospital. Now it's set to take to the sky via the Hunter's Westpac rescue helicopter, virtually allowing the hospital to travel to the baby until it can be transferred to one.
If a baby gets sick in anywhere in Hunter, New England or the North Coast region of New South Wales, then we will get a call to actually go and retrieve that baby. So we can actually take this crib out and we can actually go and provide all intensive care services that we would normally do at John Hunter Children's Hospital.
It just means that we can take it further afield. It's a lot lighter, and retrieve bubs back to the John Hunter Hospital.
Doctors and nurses from John Hunter Children's Hospital have this week been trained on helicopter safety and how to use the portable intensive care unit. The $180,000 crib and helicopter equipment was funded by Extrata Coal and community donations.
We've purchased about up to 30 flight suits for them, and we're in the process now of buying them new flight helmets for their own use, and at around a cost of around $4,000 each.
Christy Carter, NBN News.
There was both optimism and excitement late yesterday as the salvage team prepared to try and refloat the ship. It was business as usual in the harbour as regular shipping came and went, passing by the stranded Pasha Bulker, which was about to get a chance to float again.
And what we want to achieve is the removal of the Pasha Bulker. We want to be able to kiss the Pasha goodbye.
The centrepiece of the plan involved 6 steel cables attached to the ship, 3 of those to tugs and 3 to sea anchors set offshore. As a wintry night descended on Newcastle, most of the seawater ballast had been pumped out of the hold and the tugs, led by the largest, the Pacific Responder, began to pull. They churned up a violent wake as their large propellers spun, and with the tide reaching its peak, the bow of the ship began to float, effectively bouncing on each of the 2 to 3 metre swells that washed onto Nobby's beach. With every small gain made by the tugs, the crew aboard the ship would take up the slack on the sea anchor cables using the ship's own giant winches. Ashore, members of the Environmental Response Team made regular patrols of the beach checking for oil, and due to police restrictions and the cold, wet weather, only a handful of brave souls ventured out for a look at the operation. Over the course of the evening, the bow was pulled towards the open sea by several metres, but the heavier stern section of the ship remained stuck in the sand. The constant wave action didn't help, and then at the height of the effort, a cable attached to the tug Kira snapped. It was only considered a minor setback and the pulling continued, but 2 more of the remaining cables also parted, one to the Pacific Responder, another to one of the sea anchors, effectively ending the first salvage attempt.
The success that was experienced yesterday evening in getting buoyancy, in not having an oil spill, is really good progress. What that says to us, that every high tide presents itself as an opportunity to continue on the plan.
So the ship remains a well-lit feature of the Newcastle skyline for at least another night. Thank you, Natasha. The salvage company has its eye on tomorrow night's high tide for the next salvage attempt. They weren't able to take advantage of tonight's tide because those snapped steel cables haven't been properly repaired yet. Seawater was today pumped back into the Pasha Bulker to allow it to sit firmly on the beach, and efforts are underway to repair the damaged hardware, which includes raising one of those sea anchors from the sea floor to check it for damage. The next attempt is planned for tomorrow night. The high tide comes along at around 10 minutes past 8. So the drama will continue then, but in the meantime, restrictions for cars and pedestrians are still in place right across Newcastle's East End.
These mothers and their tiny babies feel abandoned. Last week, the only child and family health centre on the Tillagary Peninsula was shut down by the Hunter New England Area Health Service due to storm damage. Today, they demanded it be reopened.
It's not something that can just be passed off. It's a need, it's a necessity that every young mother deserves and needs, a community health clinic and a nurse to check up on us and the baby's health.
The health service now expects mothers to visit a clinic in Medowie, but Port Stephens Council says that's simply too far away.
The bottom line is they need to get the service back here and contact us and arrange it as soon as possible.
Mothers have been bringing their babies to the health clinic at the Tillagary Community Centre since it first opened in 1985. Hunter New England's Area Health Service's sudden decision to shut the facility without any warning has left them confused and upset.
I'm really frightened that the service isn't going to be there with this child because it proved to be so essential with the other two.
Madeline Bond, NBN News.
It went from a trickle to a torrent in no time, terrifying many and leaving businesses devastated.
Yeah, there's a large amount of sort of violent flooding happened in Wallsend. It's flash flooding, and it trapped people in the premises and at Wallsend Plaza.
These pictures were shot from the front steps of an electrical goods store on that fateful night of June 8. Today, the staff of that store, Joyce Main, thanked the 1,000 SES volunteers for their efforts with a cheque for $50,000.
On the Friday night that the storm started, we certainly were involved in rescuing people, We had people trapped in their cars calling on their mobile phones.
And after bravely rescuing the crew of the Pasha Bolker in dramatic scenes off Newcastle, the Westpac rescue helicopter has been inundated with generous donations totalling about $80,000 in the last 3 weeks. Meanwhile, the Regional Disaster Relief Fund set up by the Newcastle Permanent has reached almost $3.5 million. The donations will go to charity organisations involved in the storm recovery effort. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
Thank goodness our cub cooks aren't trained by celebrity chef Gordon Ramsay. The so-called reality series doesn't represent your typical training kitchen, yet the show can take some credit for sparking renewed interest in commercial cookery.
And that's probably what made me want to be a chef, watching that whole theatrical, but it's sort of not really like that.
Of course it's not. This is a place where you can really play with your food.
We give the apprentices the opportunity to try trimming the expensive cuts of meat, to use some of those ingredients they might not necessarily be allowed to touch in the workplace because of the cost of the ingredient.
You want to develop the flavour of the onion and the garlic.
Hungry yet?
Just bringing up the tempura seafood, and it's going to be served with a lemon, soy and chilli dressing.
Taste test everything, which is good. It's good fun.
But these days there isn't much to taste test, with portions getting smaller. The industry calls it presentation. Teachers judge the look while the food is left up to the toughest critics, with regular meals offered in the TAFE dining room. There's actually a waiting list, and a long one at that, of people wanting to come and have lunch offered by the apprentices. Today it's a 3-course meal at $20 per head.
Your meal, sir?
Oh, thank you very much for that. Looks awesome. Been waiting for this segment all week. Just so you know, the main meal on the menu is a lamb loin with warm tabbouleh and mint yogurt. That is really good. And it wasn't just us who thought so, even if this lady was given the wrong meal.
I found lunch to be absolutely delicious.
They did an outstanding job.
And we've always had lovely service, lovely attention and extra good food.
The empty plates are evidence of that, but the reviews aren't always glowing.
Of course, you still get your mistakes, and customers know that. That's why they come to TAFE for a nice cheap meal. But sometimes it's great, and other times it's okay, and that's part of learning.
And apprentices learn quickly that being a chef often means late nights, busy kitchens and hungry customers. So it's no wonder the dropout rate is high. Yet for those who stay on, the rewards are there. Just ask Chris Thornton, who's won a scholarship to train in London for a month with top chef Brett Graham, a graduate of the same TAFE course.
The guy's got so much knowledge and experience that I'll take as much as I can from him.
How to make a good pudding is probably one thing. Chris admits desserts have taken some practice, but even if he did struggle with sweets, working with a whisk was much more appealing than being behind a desk.
I was set to sort of go to university after high school and work in the kitchen. I couldn't see myself working at university and doing a 9-to-5 job.
And there's nothing 9 to 5 about TAFE. Adam McKilrick, NBN News.
Yeah, I think it's a big challenge for us. We've got a lot of injuries and a lot of guys out with representative duties, but in saying that, we're at home and we've still got a pretty good side on paper. So.
When Seagulls 5/8 Paul Skovgaard broke his hand back in May, Lakes lost one of its best. In the scheme of things, though, he didn't miss that much football.
Yeah, I was quite fortunate with the long weekend. I mean, everyone had the bye and then the washout, so that enabled me to only miss the 3 club games. So I've had 6 weeks out.
In his return, Skovgaard really did have a hand in everything, leading Lakes to a win over Wests on Monday night and the outright competition lead. Off-field dramas relating to the financial position of the club clearly haven't bothered the Seagulls, who head back to Belmont on Sunday to meet a desperate Raymond Terrace.
We sort of don't let anything distract us from off the field and just let our talk and happen on the field, And as I said, we're a close-knit sort of group and there's some quality players,
Curry kicks the weekend off when it hosts Western Suburbs, while in Newcastle, Souths play Cessnock. 3 games complete round 14 on Sunday, and should Lakes lose, a win over Macquarie would see Nelson Bay jump into the outright lead. Hunter just couldn't match the Kestrels last week, with the Melbourne side leading at every quarter. The Jaggers' Alex Harding, though, was a standout and has made sure the goal shooter's spot is fiercely fought for.
There's always a competition at training and there's always competition at match day, but it's healthy. I think it's great because it makes you work that little bit extra.
And it's worked all season for Karen Bailey, who enjoys an 87% strike rate, among the highest in the league.
I think personally I'm doing all right this season and hopefully the selectors will see that and I'll get picked up next year.
That's when the Jaggers and Swifts become one team to form part of the new Trans-Tasman competition. The year just keeps getting better for Newcastle striker Kate Gill. Along with Sydney Sarah Walsh, the Matildas pair are among 5 finalists for the Asian Football Confederation's Women's Player of the Year award. It should come as no surprise for Gill, having scored a staggering 13 goals during 3 of the Olympic qualifiers. In NBN soccer, ladder leader Lake Macquarie hosts the second-placed Edgeworth on Sunday, while the Waratahs will have a go at ending Merryweather's unbeaten run in Newcastle and Hunter rugby.